Most fans think an underdog stops a giant by defending for 90 minutes and getting lucky. That is the comforting explanation. Cabo Verde did something far more difficult against Spain and Uruguay. They built two different traps, survived two different kinds of pressure, and made two former world champions play the match Cabo Verde wanted. The scoreboards looked impossible. A goalless draw with Spain, then a 2-2 draw with Uruguay. 2 games, 2 points, no defeat, and a World Cup debutante suddenly standing inside the most unlikely story of the tournament. But this was not one miracle repeated twice. Spain and Uruguay do not attack in the same way. Spain wants to stretch your structure until a passing lane opens. Uruguay under Marcelo Bielsa wants to accelerate the game until your structure breaks. One opponent asks you to concentrate. The other demands that you survive chaos. Cabo Verde answered both questions. To understand how, forget possession for a moment. Possession tells you who had the ball. It does not tell you who controlled the important spaces, who chose where the next pass would go, or who remained calm when the match became uncomfortable. That is the first piece of the Cabo Verde framework. Protect the center, guide the ball outside, defend the next action, attack the moment of disorder. 4 steps, 1 system. Against Spain, the first priority was not to chase every pass. That would have been tactical suicide with excellent cardio. Spain are comfortable when defenders jump out without support. One player follows the ball, another lane opens behind him, and suddenly a harmless exchange near the touchline becomes a runner arriving inside the penalty area. Cabo Verde refused that invitation. Their defensive block stayed compact from front to back. The distances between midfield and defense remained small enough that Spain rarely received cleanly between the lines. That phrase matters. Between the lines is the pocket behind midfield, and in front of the center backs, the area where an attacking midfielder can turn and face goal. If a player such as Lamine Yamal can receive there with time, the defense is already in emergency mode. So Cabo Verde treated the middle of the pitch like protected territory. The first presser did not always try to win the ball. Often, his job was to shape the pass. He approached from an angle that discouraged Spain from playing through the center and encouraged circulation toward the flank. The winger then dropped into the next line. The fullback resisted the urge to charge forward too early. The nearest midfielder moved across. The far side tucked in. Spain could have the outside lane. What they could not have was an easy road back inside. This is called using the touchline as an extra defender. A player near the sideline has fewer directions available. Cabo Verde compressed those remaining options, forcing Spain to combine in crowded areas or send the ball backward and begin again. That does not eliminate danger, it relocates it. Spain still found crossings, cutbacks, and moments around the box. They still forced Vozinha into 7 saves. The 40-year-old goalkeeper became the visible hero because goalkeepers are where defensive stories become photographs. But the less visible work happened before every shot. The angle was narrow, the receiver was hurried, the central lane was crowded. The defender stayed connected to the next defender. Vozinha was outstanding, but Cabo Verde did not simply hand him 90 minutes of target practice and hope for divine intervention. They tried to influence the quality of the final action. When Spain broke the first line, Cabo Verde defended the second action. When a cross was cleared, they attacked the loose ball. When possession was lost, they recovered their shape before searching for a heroic tackle. Roberto Pico Lopez became essential to that calm. His route to the national team is almost too perfect for this story. Born in Dublin, once working in banking while playing part-time football, he received a message in Portuguese on LinkedIn from former Cabo Verde coach Rui Aguas. Lopez thought it was spam and ignored it for months. Eventually, the message helped lead him to a World Cup. Football scouting, apparently, can begin with the same suspicion as an email about an unexpected inheritance. Against Spain, Lopes helped organize the box and made a vital late intervention. His importance was not limited to one tackle. Center backs in a low or medium block must constantly make small decisions. Step forward or hold. Follow the runner or pass him on. Attack the cross or protect the second ball. One wrong choice creates a gap wider than the statistics will ever explain. Cabo Verde kept making the next correct choice. There was also an emotional discipline to the performance. Underdogs often defend the name on the shirt instead of the action in front of them. They see Spain, they feel the pressure, and every movement becomes urgent. Urgency becomes panic. Panic creates fouls, broken lines, and defenders diving into challenges they cannot win. Cabo Verde did not play the reputation, they played the next pass. That was how they stopped Spain. But Uruguay required a different solution. Bielsa teams do not want to hypnotize you with circulation. They want to overwhelm you with movement, direct running, aggressive positioning, and repeated entries into dangerous areas. The game can become stretched. Individual duels appear everywhere. If Spain tests the geometry of your defense, Uruguay tests its pulse. And this is where the tournament got strange. Uruguay had about 65% of the possession and produced 17 attempts. They entered the penalty area repeatedly, yet only 2 of those attempts were on target. Cabo Verde, with far less of the ball, placed 4 efforts on target. That contrast reveals the second part of the plan. Cabo Verde did not need to prevent Uruguay from arriving near goal. They needed to make the arrival untidy. There's a major difference. When Uruguay pushed bodies forward, Cabo Verde protected the most valuable zones and accepted pressure in less valuable ones. Their defenders cleared the ball 47 times according to the supplied match data. That number can sound like desperation. In context, it also shows acceptance. Cabo Verde understood that some attacks would end with an ugly clearance. The objective was not to look elegant. The objective was to ensure the next clean touch did not belong to a Uruguay attacker 6 meters from goal. The midfield worked across the pitch with enormous discipline. When one player pressed, another covered the space behind him. When the ball moved wide, the block shifted together. When Uruguay recycled possession, Cabo Verde used those extra seconds to reset their distances. This was not a wall standing still. It was a door sliding across the corridor. Uruguay tried to create overloads, which means placing more attackers than defenders in one area. Cabo Verde answered by collapsing around the ball while keeping enough protection in the center. Steven Moreira and Lopez were repeatedly asked to defend the box, track runners, and react to second balls. The duels became the real match inside the match. The supplied numbers suggest Cabo Verde won 54% of the direct duels and completed 94% of their attempted tackles. Numbers can vary slightly between data providers, but the pattern matches the pictures. Uruguay had territorial dominance. Cabo Verde was sharper when territory became confrontation. That is why possession alone can lie to you. Uruguay owned more of the pitch. Cabo Verde owned more of the decisive contact. Still, a defensive system cannot explain everything. Cabo Verde also had to threaten. Without that threat, Uruguay could commit even more players forward, squeeze the pitch, and turn the match into permanent pressure. The first warning arrived through Kevin Pina. After Rodrigo Bentancur fouled Telmo Arcanjo, Cabo Verde received a free kick from long range. Most teams would treat it as a crossing position. Pina saw a shot. Uruguay formed a small wall. The gap appeared. Pina drove the ball with his right foot, sending it through the weakness and into the lower corner beyond Fernando Muslera. It was Cabo Verde's first World Cup goal. The technique was spectacular, but the tactical consequence mattered just as much. Uruguay could no longer treat Cabo Verde as a team waiting to survive. Every foul became dangerous. Every transition carried doubt. Every loose ball could change the score. That is how an underdog creates defensive protection through attacking credibility. Uruguay responded before halftime through Maximiliano Araujo and Agustin Canobio. 2 shots on target, 2 goals. That efficiency could have broken Cabo Verde emotionally. It would have been easy to interpret the comeback as the natural order returning, the giant correcting an administrative error. Cabo Verde did not accept the correction. After the interval, they continued to look for the moment of disorder. Uruguay's aggressive approach creates attacking force, but force has a cost. Players advance. Distances grow. Rest defense becomes critical. Rest defense is the structure a team keeps behind the ball while attacking. It exists to stop a counterattack before it begins. If that structure loses its spacing or communication, one direct action can turn an attack at one end into an emergency at the other. In the 61st minute, that emergency arrived. Muslera came away from his goal. The defensive picture became confused, and Helio Varela punished the uncertainty to equalize. The finish belongs in Cabo Verde history. The opportunity belonged to the larger strategy. Stay alive long enough, remain close enough, make the favorite defend one more transition. Then strike when certainty disappears. That is the difference between passive resistance and competitive resistance. A passive team hopes the opponent misses. A competitive team keeps asking the opponent to solve problems in both directions. Cabo Verde were not flawless. Uruguay created enough pressure to win many matches. The expected goals estimate in the supplied data favored Uruguay heavily. Moreira was required to make crucial interventions near the line. Vozinha and his defenders lived through sequences that would shorten the life expectancy of an assistant coach. But tactical success is not the absence of danger. It is the management of danger. Cabo Verde decided which risks they could tolerate. Crosses under pressure were tolerable. Central receivers turning freely were not. Long spells without the ball were tolerable. Losing emotional control was not. Clearances were tolerable. A broken rest shape after winning possession was not. This is the third piece of the framework. Small teams do not beat scale by pretending scale does not matter. They beat it by concentrating their limited resources on the moments with the highest value. Cabo Verde has a population of just over 500,000, but the national team is not limited to the talent living on the islands. Its recruitment network reaches into a global diaspora. Players developed in Portugal, Ireland, France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere can bring different football educations into one national structure. The Lope story is charming because it began with LinkedIn. The deeper lesson is institutional. When your domestic pool is small, identity becomes a scouting network. Geography becomes strategy. Bubisa then had to turn that scattered talent into a coherent team. That is harder than collecting names. International coaches have limited training time. Complex club mechanisms cannot simply be downloaded into a national side. The system must be clear enough to travel. Cabo Verde's system travels because its principles are simple. Stay compact, protect the middle. Shift together, win the next duel. Attack the exposed moment. Simple does not mean easy. A violin score can be simple too. It still sounds terrible if everyone enters at the wrong time. Against Spain, the timing controlled spaces. Against Uruguay, the timing controlled collisions. In both matches, the players understood when not to press as clearly as when to press. That restraint is one of the rarest qualities in tournament football. The story also grew beyond tactics through Vozinha. After his saves against Spain, a Brazilian streaming campaign helped send his social media following into the millions. His mother was then able to travel to Miami and watch the next chapter unfold. A goalkeeper from a small island nation became one of the faces of the World Cup almost overnight. That explosion matters because modern tournaments are played on two pitches. One is grass, the other is attention. On the grass, Cabo Verde denied space. Online, their story occupied all of it. But the attention should not distort the football. Viral fame did not produce the defensive block. The defensive block produced the moment that made viral fame possible. The human story works because the sporting achievement underneath it is real. Two draws also changed the logic of Group H. Spain led after beating Saudi Arabia. Uruguay and Cabo Verde stood level on points, with qualifications still open before the final round. In the expanded World Cup, finishing third can also offer a route into the round of 32. That creates another strategic question. Should Cabo Verde protect what they have, or chase the victory that could remove the uncertainty? The answer will reveal whether this team can perform the hardest transformation in tournament football. Surprise is reactive. Progress requires initiative. Spain and Uruguay gave Cabo Verde clear roles. Defend, absorb, disrupt, counter. Against an opponent they may be expected to beat, the spaces will change. Cabo Verde may need to hold more possession, build attacks, and take responsibility for opening a compact defense. That is a different examination. The underdog's greatest reward is also its next problem. Once the world respects you, it stops offering the same opportunities. So what exactly was impossible about the way Cabo Verde stopped Spain and Uruguay? It was not that they defended deep. Hundreds of teams defend deep. It was that they changed the function of their defense for each opponent without losing their identity. Spain were guided outside and denied clean central combinations. Uruguay were allowed territory, but dragged into hurried final actions and decisive duels. In both matches, Cabo Verde protected the center, defended the next action, and preserved enough attacking threat to punish disorder. They did not control the ball. They controlled the terms of survival. Most fans think an underdog stops a giant by defending for 90 minutes and getting lucky. Cabo Verde have now shown the more uncomfortable truth. Luck may visit once, but a structure can keep the door open. And if that structure carries them into the knockout round, Spain and Uruguay will not be remembered as two miracles. They will be remembered as the warning. Tell us in the comments whether Cabo Verde can take the next step. Because surviving giants was only the beginning. Now they must prove they can make history when the giants are no longer surprised.